This is the Lockpicker 1969, and welcome to my channel, and welcome to an episode of Challenge Lock Workshop. Today we're interviewing FreeDiver as a challenge lock maker. Say hi.
Hey everybody, how you doing? Hey, you've rearranged the place a little bit. Looks nice in here.
Yep, the furniture needed to be moved around a little bit. So, how long have you been making challenge locks?
Um, well, my first one was, probably like most people when I was trying for my blue belt. So that would have been about a month after I started. So, um, I don't know, just over about a year and a half, I guess.
Okay. So, you made your first challenge lock with the blue belt. So, what was that like?
Uh, at the time, I didn't really want to build a challenge lock, but I just kind of did it to do it. It was a master lock, the 930XL. I don't know what all the letters are that go behind it. The Pro Series master lock. And then I didn't really have tools. I had a Dremel tool. I had some old small files that I'd done for a previous hobby and just kind of hacked it together. And I sent it to somebody, and it wasn't super difficult. I think it took them like less than 5 minutes to get it, so I kind of reworked it and sent it back to him. And then the next time it took him about 10 minutes, and I was happy with that.
Okay.
So it was just kind of a process just to see. And yeah, I kind of more enjoyed putting a theme on the lock than I did, and
Yeah.
that was kind of my experience overall to making challenge locks was coming up with an idea for a theme for it.
Yeah, I enjoy doing themes as well. It makes it more fun, and I think when there's a bit of a background to the lock or a concept. So,
Right, right.
so did that lock inspire you to keep creating challenge locks?
Um, No, not really. I actually saw one. I don't know whose lock it is, but they made it look like a hand grenade. I think it's somewhere in Australia. I don't
Yep.
remember what that one is or who made it, but I know, I remember that one. That and somebody sent me well, actually it was Joe Pix sent me a challenge lock that's still kind of underground. It hasn't made it out as far as I know. It's called Uno, and it was in a 3D printed box by Joe. So that kind of got my gears flowing on some other ideas, I guess. And that's what kind of made me want to do a little bit more. But I also, like I said, it was more the theming, so I thought if I ever do any more, they'd be kind of based around, I'm a free diver, so it'd be based around ocean stuff. So I made a couple of them, Honu, which is a turtle, Kai, which is ocean, just stuff like that. So I was kind of naming them based off of freediving.
Okay, cool. So, at this point, how many challenge locks would you say you've created? All themed, I'm assuming. So,
Yeah, I think around 10, so
okay.
not too many.
So, out of all the challenge locks, out of those 10, which one would you say was the most difficult for you to make and why?
The most difficult would be puka. Puka means hole. We used to, when I was diving in Hawaii, there was a place, we'd always look for the pukas to dive through in the volcanic rock and stuff, holes in the rocks to dive through. Um, that one was the most difficult because basically what the lock is it's three separate Bibles. It's a mortise cylinder, and it's got two like 35 degrees off chambers in it, so it'll actually lock and unlock in three different positions. So getting those holes to come out right, everything to line up. I was using a Dremel tool with a Dremel press. I'm not a machinist or anything like that, so I've done some of that type of work, so I knew it'd be very difficult to do. And getting everything aligned, and not just you don't just align it, forward and back to get the hole straight, but you also have to have it vertically aligned. You have to
Yeah.
have it level. Everything's got to be completely square, and then you have deflection from the drill bit hitting the surface of the lock, that's curved, and yeah, so there's everything comes into play with getting those holes right. And I thought, if I get it set up and get it right, I'm going to just do a bunch of them. And as I got going, I was like, nope, I'm just going to do one and just be done with it, because I got lucky. I know I got lucky to get them, to get the key to work at the other two positions, and I didn't press my luck.
So, if I heard you correctly, you said you were using some kind of press. Was it a Dremel workstation you're talking about?
Yeah, the Dremel workstation,
Yeah.
it's kind of works like a drill press, because I don't
Yeah.
have a real drill press or anything like that. So
I
yeah,
I use
and then
that.
I
I use one of those too. That's why I was asking.
yeah, they're not the most precise. I tightened up the screws as much as I could to get all the
Yeah.
play out of it that I could get out of it, but it's not the most precise piece of machinery in the world. So
No.
um, yeah, so
But if you don't have a drill press, then that's a good second, you know,
yeah.
tool to
And then
use.
I had to make a jig too. So there's actually a video on Picksmith's channel about Puka. I sent it to him, and then he wanted to do something a little further with it. And then he made some minor modifications to the lock itself, like the key and stuff. But um, you know, I sent it to him, uh, and we kind of did a collaboration video. It cuts from me to him, and I kind of explained it there, and I showed the jig in that video. I had to actually design the jig that the mortise cylinder would sit on, so that it would roll, the 30 degrees or 35 degrees, whatever it was, to the right and to the left. So it had a post that it sat on, and then it would roll to the right and stop, so that when I drilled, it wouldn't move. And then I had a sled that I had attached to the drill press, so I could like use a dial to move the thing back, uh, just the right amount that I wanted to move it and everything. So it was pretty involved to do, and it was not an easy process.
So, what method did you use to make your pins?
Um, Method? You mean what type of tools to
Well,
do it, or what do you mean
yeah.
by method?
Well, tools plus, so like the Dremel workstation has the ability to turn the Dremel sideways, and I found that very useful for making pins. I was just curious if you use that method to help spin
Oh,
the brass.
no. I use a Dremel, but um, I also bought the chuck. Instead of the normal one where you could just put it into the collets, I bought the Dremel chuck. It tends to be a little bit better for me to lock them up.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I can. You probably know, if you use a Dremel, when you put the pin in and you start spinning the collet down, it kind of pulls the pin in a little bit, and it doesn't. It kind of changes what kind of purchase you have. Now that only matters obviously if you're using the pins. I generally would use the pins that I had, like extra pins laying around. I wouldn't go and buy material from Ace Hardware or whatever, the brass rod. So I didn't have a lot of room to get purchase on the pin.
Gotcha.
So getting the what do you call it, the chuck. It's like a three nose chuck on there that I tend to find I had better purchase on the pin to get a hold of it.
Okay. Yeah, I use.
So
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I would say, so then from there I was just gonna say, I don't use a workstation. I actually get down on the floor, put a towel down or whatever to have underneath of me to catch all the debris, and then I I'm more steady when I'm like laying on my stomach, have my elbows down, and I'm holding the um, yeah, the Dremel in my hand, and then I use files or a jeweler's saw or whatever I'm going to use to do the cuts.
Okay.
And then I also have a pair of magnifying glasses, that do 3 times whatever, and have a light on them so I can see really, because those pins are so small, and then I can get a better view of what I'm doing.
Sure. Okay. Well, so like I said, I was using the Dremel workstation, and turn it sideways. And that I do use brass rod stock to make the drivers for the key pins, though I will take standard key pins and just get as much purchase on them as I can and then modify those, on the Dremel as well. But for collecting the dust, they have those if your Dremel is up, they have those plastic shoe boxes you can get at like Home Depot and Lowe's and all those types of places that have the lids.
Mhm.
The shoe box is just short enough to fit underneath there to capture all your dust. And if you're cutting a pin from the rod from like rod stock, one of the challenges there is once it's cut free, the pin go flying off somewhere, but the bin typically catches that too just fine. You don't wind up having to do a search and rescue mission for the pin after you've cut it off the rod stock. So,
Yeah.
so what would you say was the most challenging challenge lock you put out there to the public for the, so what was the most challenging for the community to open?
Um, well, I never wanted to make them too challenging because when I started doing it, I wasn't a great picker. So I thought, well, I should be able to pick it, but I want it harder than the lock is, stock or whatever, which
Mm-hmm.
is kind of hard to do when you're using American locks. I think a lot of times people make challenge locks out of American locks, and it actually makes them easier than they would have been stock. It's a very tough lock to make a challenge lock out of, or a decent challenge lock out of. But I never went for difficulty, and then I made duality, and it was unintentionally difficult.
I've heard of
And I
it.
felt bad. Yeah, I felt bad about it because it wasn't supposed to be. It was supposed to be
Fun.
like 15-minute overall. Yeah, it was supposed to be something fun for the community to do. So I felt bad. Um, but then I don't remember what it was, why I changed my mind, but I know what it was. So I took Duality. Duality is a 3D printed box for people that may not know. I designed the whole lock mechanism for everything to lock up. Um, when At some point I made a smaller version of it and I made a little trap door so the key could be kept inside. You could actually still get the key out. I thought, well, what if I had one that was really tough to open and the key was stored inside? You had to unlock it to get the key out of it. So I came up. I think the last place I saw it, Sadistic Picker had it. I don't know if he ever got it. I don't know if he sent it on. I know he's been having some issues or whatever, so he's been away a little bit. But I don't know what he ever did with it, where it went. But basically, the key's locked inside, and it's a very difficult pick.
Yeah,
That was my first one to make intentionally.
I'm.
Um,
I was going to say I'm patiently waiting. I sent, or Lady Lock sent one of my challenge locks that I just put out there and sent it off to Sadistic. So I am very willing to wait whatever time it takes for him to get his hands on it and give it a go. I want to really see that. So
yeah, I think he has Puka as well. I think Lady Locks was sending it to him. I'm not exactly sure. Um, but that was another, also on that one, the fun thing was designing the box for it. If you haven't seen the video, it's a pretty cool box, and I would just play with, it has magnets for the lid, and I would just sit there and play with the lid on the box. I just really enjoyed that box. Um, but yeah, so Impossibilities was probably the hardest one. And then I also, because I made Duality, I made another one that was Singularity, and Lady Locks had that one. It took her some time to pick it. So to be honest, I don't know. I think Impossibilities is tougher than because of a couple of the pins and the way I did them. I think Impossibilities would be probably tougher than Singularity.
well, I'll tell you what, if you have any STL files for any of the boxes you used and you're willing to share them, I would love to get my hands on it and build that into something that would be fun.
Yeah, so the STLs I have, there is one on of mine, and I'll have to try to send you a link. And I promised I would send you that pinning tray too, and I never did that, but I'll work on that today, or not today. I have a birthday party to go to. I'll work on it, I promise. But I have my American lock box on Thingiverse.
Okay.
So if you've ever seen any of my American lock challenge locks have gone out, they go out in a little box, and I did it for singularity. I just modified it a little bit for singularity.
Okay.
Um, the uh, the other ones, let me see, like duality, and then I took the lock mechanism of duality and made it just a holder. Yeah, so I should have that STL file. I can forward those on to you.
Great. That'd be awesome. I would definitely appreciate that. So, do you make any challenge locks specifically for specific pickers? Or have you?
Technically, no. Technically, no. I pretty much, like I said, I was theming them. Other than impossibilities, duality, and singularity, they were all meant to be themed around diving. So it was more just to do them for a theme. Now, I will say when I was doing impossibilities, I was kind of thinking about Picksmith because he's the one that I was sending it to. So I was intentionally making it harder to pick. But it wasn't for him. It was just having watched some of the things, and he was helping me with some float picking on one of the ones I was doing. So I I kind of yeah, I was using him as a gauge because of the people that I know there's really good challenge lock pickers, but
Yeah.
of the ones that I was dealing with at the time, he was, probably the top in ability to pick. So yeah, so I was kind of thinking about stumping him and that, but it wasn't really for him. It was more for the community, and it was the one that had the key locked inside. So
Okay.
I wanted it to be very strong. So I was kind of reminiscing on things that he had talked about in some of his videos and had told me and stuff like that.
So you addressed this a little bit, and I want to go dive a little deeper. So you base your locks around themes, and your inspiration, seems to come from diving, per se. But when you look at approaching making a challenge lock, so beyond the theme and the inspiration for what you're gonna call it and so forth, what would you say is your approach to planning what you're going to put in? Or because some people just start working at it and it comes to them, and then other people already have it in their head exactly what they're going to do. So what approach would you say you take when you're sitting down to make a brand new challenge lock?
Um, well, I do the theme. I
Yep.
really work hard on the theme, and then I get excited and I want the lock to go out, so I quickly make some pins.
Okay. Okay. Yep.
I play with them. I make sure that I see, I put the pin into the core. I see how it's going to react and play and stuff like that. Make sure, I usually make sure that the key, I don't, I, I don't really like that sawtooth method because it's like, okay, well, if I do that, then I have at least two low key pins that it doesn't matter what I do to the top pin because they're hardly used at all. I think the challenge is in making the pins dance and work. So um, I usually use not a level key, but um, longer key pins so that there's something that the person has to pick through it.
Yeah.
Um, because as you're picking through it, you don't really know if the key. I mean, unless the key's out, but you don't really know what the key is. So I figured I almost I really wanted to be cruel. I never did it. Picksmith said I'd be evil for doing it. I wanted to use a zero-bitted lock. So if you knew, you could just like use the back of the pick and you could get it open. But if you don't know, you're going to be there, all day working on every step and every pin, trying to get them all the way up to the top.
Yeah.
That I think would be, if you don't know it's there, would be probably one of the hardest ones to do because you have to get through all the pins. So actually, that's what happened with Puka is I had a key that had a couple of low pins and they just some of the pins just never came into play. And then Picksmith recut a key and made the other pins work just a little bit more, and that significantly increase the difficulty. I wouldn't say Puka's a super difficult pick, but it's not easy either, especially if you've never seen it before. So, but yeah, I think if you're going to put all that work into the top pins, if you have really short key pins, you've just done a lot of work for nothing.
Yeah.
So those are the kind, so I think about how much play there's going to be in the pins, but as far as planning out the pins and am I going to thread this one or that one, I do it as I go. And like I said, usually I get the theme. I just want the theme out there, and it's like I get excited about it. So the pins are almost an afterthought for me,
Mm-hmm.
because at the end of the day, I know I'm just making a variation of a spool or or a serrated pin or something like that. So I don't think about it too much. I don't go into, like, some people use magnets and all sorts of different um, things like that. I did use a screw and threaded, so like what was it, like a 1032 and screw, and then the hole was the same 32 pitch but one size bigger or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't remember
Yep.
what the actual sizes of each one was, but
Yep.
basically so that the pitches matched so that they would lock up really good. But that's kind of as far as I went with
Well,
difficulty.
here's a bit of evil for you. A key pin and a driver pin, both, using a threaded rod, and the chamber being threaded, just one size larger than your pins, and throw a magnet into that works. Make them steel threaded rods, and you want to talk about a pain in the butt to figure out getting that just to shear line and not oversetting it or undersetting it, because they're sticking
Yeah, and
together.
not and not hanging up. Yeah, because
Yeah.
it'd be yeah
Yep. So,
yeah
so you
yeah.
you mentioned using a Dremel in some of what you do, and you mentioned that you started out with your old files. So, what have you added to your arsenal for building challenge locks tools wise?
Um, well, the Dremel's the main tool,
Yeah.
because if I'm going to engrave on the lock or make the key pins, the Dremel's pretty much it. I added the workstation, but I really only use that for one lock. Um, and then I had the jeweler saw. That's probably the primary cutting tool that I would use, because I could be very precise with, like, if I'm making basically a wide spool or whatever, I can be very precise with how wide the fins are that I'm making, or what have you. And I really enjoyed using the jeweler saw to do a lot of that.
I
The
do a lot of
the
that too.
files,
Yep.
the files, they clog up super easy. The brass is, it yeah. But again, I'm not. I could probably use better lubrication and that, and not have the clogging. But I'm usually just trying to get it out the door at that point. Like I said, I really enjoy the theming more than the pins. And if the pin, like on duality, the pins weren't supposed to be that difficult, but in the keyway that they were in, it just became a total pain in the butt. And it was after that that I decided, okay, I'm not going to use those keyways like that anymore. I don't remember what they were. I bought some odd keyways. I didn't even know what the keyways looked like when I ordered them, but I ordered them from CLK, and
Yep.
I didn't even, uh, I just saw some different keyways and ordered them, and it turned out they were just really tough to get a pick into, and that just seems like and no offense to anybody, because I know some of them, I've had some come from Europe that are those really twisted keyways, and those are a challenge, but it's not the challenge I wanted. I wanted it to
Yeah.
all. I wanted the fun to be in the pins, not in
Yeah.
trying to get the pick to work just right in a certain keyway. So I wouldn't say it was a cheap way, but I don't know how else to say it. I just didn't. It wasn't for me. So
No, I
yeah,
understand that. You want your lock to be fun to pick, not impossible.
yeah,
It's if it's
yeah,
impossible, eventually the picker that's trying it just gives up, or it doesn't wind up making it out of their naughty bin, which is unfortunate that it doesn't get sent
yeah,
on. But you don't want that. You want
Yeah,
it to be enjoyed by as many people as possible. So
yeah,
understandable.
and I got one from uh, not Fumbler. Who's the other guy? Manipulator. I got one from Manipulator, and his was his first CL, and I felt bad because I didn't really care to pick it. And I like Manipulator. Him and I, we chat all the time and sent each other some locks and that. But it was that twisted keyway, and I was just having trouble finding a pick that would work, and I just wasn't enjoying it. So, and he did a really good job making it. He spent a lot of time on it and everything, but it just wasn't for me. So, I sent it on to someone else.
Okay. All right. So last question before we wrap up. Um, are there any other challenge lock makers that you have or take inspiration from or admire their work?
Um, I wouldn't say I take inspiration from them, but there are a couple, DMAC, Land Spikey, those guys that make the piston pins and
Mm-hmm.
coming up with some creative ideas for pins like that. That's interesting to see them do it. Um, I don't have the desire to put that kind of time into pins, so it's not something that I want to replicate, but it is pretty cool to see them doing it.
Yeah.
So for me, I would say I guess whoever it was that made the hand grenade lock probably inspired me the most to come up with some unique ideas. And to me, it seemed like if I could capture a good theme, something that was interesting, then it would kind of be more remembered rather than just another really difficult lock to pick. So uh, yeah, shout out. I guess I should have looked that up to see who created that one. But yeah, shout out to I think it was somebody from Australia that made the hand grenade one.
Yeah, I'm totally on board with the whole theming thing. I've been doing themes since the first challenge locks when I did Blue Belt. So I love having a story too behind it. So what I'm working from is that my theming is based around dragons and dragon lore. So there's like the House of Dragon. There's a bunch of different dragons that go along with that whole series of books, and each dragon that has been taken down was taken down a certain way. And I try to incorporate something in the lock that, if you read the lore and pay attention to the lore that I provide in the logbook, that you essentially then have some hint into what you should be looking for in the challenge lock to get
Right.
to defeat it. So
Yeah,
try to
and
tie it together.
yeah, I kind of I wanted to tie the theme to the lock somehow, but I never saw a good way, and that's probably
Yeah.
why I got into the 3D printing. Well, I know that's kind of what led me to the box for duality is I was trying to incorporate the lock and almost I kind of wanted to have a puzzle almost to get to the lock or something.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I never really accomplished, and I never really fully settled in my mind what I was trying to do. But I wanted the lock, the box, the story. I kind of wanted it all to tie together, and that's a very difficult thing to do. If if you can make a story that had kind of a puzzle that would, yeah, I never figured out how to do it. I had it in my head that I wanted to do it, but I couldn't get all of it together. I
Okay.
think duality is probably the closest, but I didn't have a story for duality. It was more
Okay.
just a project.
Well, is there anything you'd like to say to our audience before we wrap up about challenge lock making, maybe?
No, other than a lot of people I think are like me that make them just for a blue belt, but definitely give it a chance. You might
Yeah.
find something that you enjoy, and
Yep.
um, some people just think they're not handy enough or whatever. People do that in a lot of different activities. I'm flying flight sims, and people, oh, I could never do that. It's like, well, you never know until you try. Get out and try it. So
Yep.
it's the biggest thing. Just if you have an interest in it, think it looks cool, like it'd be fun to do, just try it. And that goes for more than just lock picking, obviously.
Yeah.
Just if you have an interest in something, give it a go. Don't just sit and admire, get involved. So.
Don't sit around wishing you'd tried it.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, for sure.
So I really appreciate you doing this interview. I enjoy everybody I interview for this. This topic is very near and dear to my heart. So I appreciate you sharing all of this with me and with our audience. But I definitely would like to have you back to do an interview for the Locksport 3D printing series. I think that would be interesting as well, with everything you've done with that
Yeah.
for Locksport. So I wanted to mention to our audience a reminder. All of the interview series I do on my channel are provided as podcasts as well through YouTube. So if you need just a way of listening, definitely check that out. So, okay, so with that, I'll wrap this one up. Again, I want to thank you for this interview. This has been fun. If you are a subscriber, thank you. If you are not yet a subscriber, please hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications and all, and hit like on the video. And thanks for listening.